This is Bluebook Digital SAT number 8, Math Module 1. What is the y-intercept of the graph shown? Well, the y-intercept is clear as a bell right here, is 0, 8. The function f is defined as that. What is the value of f of x when x equals negative 8? So that would be negative 3 times negative 8, which is 24, plus 60 is 84. A producer is creating a video with a length of 70 minutes. The video will consist of segments that are 1 minute long and segments that are 3 minutes long. Which equation expresses the situation where x represents the number of 1 minute segments and y represents the number of 3 minute segments? We can think about it by example. If y is the number of 3 minute segments and there were 5 of them, that would be 15 minutes of the 3 minute segments, which would be 3 times y. So it's 1 times x plus 3 times y is 70. A bowl contains 20 ounces of water. When the bowl is uncovered, the amount of water in the bowl decreases by 1 ounce for every 4 days. If 9 ounces of water remain in the bowl, for how many days has it been uncovered? So if it goes from 20 down to 9, it loses 11 ounces. And every ounce takes 4 days to lose. So 11 times 4 is 44. Each of the dot plots shown represents the number of glue sticks brought in by each student for 2 classes, Class A and Class B. Which statement best compares the standard deviations of the number of glue sticks brought in by each student for these 2 classes? So you don't have to know the official formula for standard deviation, which is something pretty complicated in statistics. All you have to know is the basic idea that standard deviation means how spread out the data are. If you look at these 2 charts, all they've done is take the same data and slide it up by 13 units. So if everything increases by the same amount, the standard deviation, the degree to which it's spread out in and among itself, is the same, which is equal to, standard deviations are equal. Which expression is equivalent to? So you could write these out to be really, really careful if you wanted to, which is probably what I'd recommend. So make sure to distribute the minus sign, right? So 7x cubed plus 7x minus 6x cubed, and that becomes plus 3x is single x cubed plus 10x. Triangle ABC, the measure of angle A is 54. The measure of angle B is 90, and the measure of angle C is k over 2. So as an equation, it would be 54 plus 90 plus k over 2 equals 180, which would get you to k over 2 being 36, which makes the answer 72. What is one of the solutions to the given equation? Well, solutions are the things that make it true. So for this one, the solutions would be x being 0 because of this, because of the x that's next to the 3, or x being 4, but definitely not negative 4, or x being negative 5, but not 5. So the answer is 0. A chemist combines water and acetic acid to make a mixture with a volume of 56 milliliters. The volume of acetic acid in the mixture is 10 milliliters. What is the volume of water in milliliters? Assume that the volume of the mixture is the sum of the volumes of water and acetic acid. This seems very straightforward. It's just that the acid plus the water is the total, which makes the answer just 46. A distance of 354 furlongs is equivalent to how many feet? 1 furlong is 220 yards. So if you wanted to write the conversion in the official skeleton notation, it would be 350 furlongs, and then you're looking at 220 yards is a furlong, and then 3 feet is a yard. So you can confirm that you have the right units because things cancel out, right? You can cancel out yards and yards and furlongs, and the answer will be in feet, which is 354 times 220 times 3 is this big number, 233,000. And how many points of the graphs of the given equation intersect in the xy plane? Well, the answer is none because they're parallel, but even if you didn't know that, you could graph it and look at the picture on Desmos in a very straightforward manner. So you simply graph that, and that, and look at it in the slightly larger picture. Sure, there's no solution. They never intersect because they're parallel. So the answer is none. 13 is p% of 25. What's the value of p? There are different ways of explaining this. In my head, it makes the most sense to simply think 13 out of 25 as a decimal. So if I were explaining it to somebody, I would just say 13 out of 25, just literally on the calculator, gives you 0.52. And the meaning of 0.52, it's literally equivalent to 52%. So the answer is 52. You could also do it by translating from words to math if you want. Some people like to say that is becomes an equal sign. And then p% means p divided by 100, right? Percent means divided by 100. And of means times. So notice that if you do it this way, you end up in the same position that we were just in. I'm going to simplify this to this and cross multiply to get 52. That function gives the number of bacteria in a population t minutes after an initial observation. How much time in minutes does it take for the number of bacteria in the population to double? So if you look at the way it's set up, 2 is acting as the multiplier. So to simply multiply by 2 itself, it would be when the entire exponent as a unit is just a 1, because then it would be 60,000 times 2. The answer is simply when t is 410. Each year, the value of an investment increases by 0.49%. Increases by 0.49%, which is the same as multiplying by, now it's not 1.49 because that would be increasing by 49%. It's not 1.049 because that would be increasing by 4.9%. It's increasing by 1.0049, which is increasing by 0.49%. So it would be whatever you started with, s times 1.0049 to the x power, where x is the number of units of time. Of course, you don't really have to know that, but you could graph that if you wanted to and confirm that it's exponential increasing. Let's look at that. Suppose it was y equaling, 5 times 1.0049 to the x power. You'll see that it forms an upward curve when you zoom way out. Yeah. Circle in the xy plane has a diameter with endpoints 2, 4, and 214. An equation of the circle is that where r is a positive constant. Well, let's make a super simple sketch of this, because in this case, the diametric endpoints vary along a single axis. So 2, 4 and 2, 14. Those are directly atop each other because, of course, the straight line distance up and down between them is just 10. So the diameter of the circle is 10, which means the radius of the circle is 5. Now, the thing a lot of people mess up is the coordinates of the center. So you either go 5 units up from here or 5 units down from here. So it's 2, and then you could have said it's either 14 minus 5 or 4 plus 5, which is 9. So we have the equation of the circle x minus 2 squared plus y minus 9 squared equals r squared, which is 25. But r itself is 5. In right triangle RST, the sum of the measures of r and s is 90 degrees. The value of sine of r is root 15 over 4. What's cos of s? Well, I recognize this having done a lot of these similar problems over time. The answer simply is that same value. It's still the root 15 over 4, but you can always show why by actually sketching a picture. So if the sum of r and s is 90 degrees, that means that r and s are the two non-right triangles. So it must be this and this, because of course t itself must be the right angle. So from the viewpoint of r, if sine is radical 15 over 4, remember that sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So from the viewpoint of capital R, from here, you could say that this is radical 15 if this is 4. And then from the viewpoint of S, remember that cosine equals adjacent over hypotenuse. So from the viewpoint of S, adjacent over hypotenuse is radical 15 over 4. You can actually zoom out further and say that in general, sine of anything in degrees is equal to cosine of 90 minus that in degrees. So for example, sine of 75 degrees is, you could have written like this, is cos of 15 degrees, and vice versa. You can say cos of q is sine of 90 minus q, and let's be in degrees to be thorough. Although you actually could do it in radians also. You can actually say that cos of, let's say, theta radians, and I always write the word radians to be cautious, is equal to sine of pi over 2 minus theta, where these are both in radians. So the answer is simply root 15 over 4. P equals that. The given equation relates the distinct positive numbers p, k, and j. Which equation correctly expresses 4j plus 9 in terms of p and k? It looks like all you have to do here is cross multiply. So if I simply think of it as p over 1 equals what's on the right-hand side, then it's p times this equals k times 1 when you cross multiply. So the thing in the parentheses, which is what it's asking about, is just the quotient of k and p. Y is greater than 13x minus 18. You could easily get Desmos to help you with this. So you can enter and graph the inequality, although that itself is kind of hard to look at exact points. What you're probably going to want to do is plug it in as a function and use the table. So here in y2, I'm going to hit the gear wheel and then the table to create a table. And then in the last row of the table, I can plug in the values as I want to. So here I can plug in 3, and you get 21. So the answer is actually not A, because 21 as proposed is not greater than 13x minus 18, right? You'd have to get more than 21. So it's not A. It's also definitely not C as in cat. And then when I plug in 5, you'd have to get something that's more than 47 as the acceptable answer choice. So it's not B as in boy. It has to be D as in dog. Line L is defined by that. Line N is perpendicular to line L in the xy plane. What is the slope of line N? Well, I would recommend rewriting the original in slope-intercept form carefully, but this is relatively straightforward. So 3y plus 12x equals 5 becomes 3y equals negative 12x plus 5. Divide everything by 3. Y equals negative 4x plus 5 thirds. Then the slope of the one that's perpendicular must be the negative reciprocal of this, which is positive 1/4. That, okay, in the given equation, D and G are unique positive constants. When the equation is graphed in the xy plane, how many distinct x-intercepts does the graph have? Even if you didn't understand this abstractly, you could actually get Desmos to help you with this by basically doing it by example. So pick unique positive constants. Let's say we're going to pick 3 and 5 as D and a G. So you'd be graphing y equals 2 times x minus 3 times x plus 3 times x plus 5 times x minus 3. And you could count the number of unique zeros as 1, 2, 3. 3 is the answer. Probably more helpful general explanation is that the different things that would make the respective parentheses units equal to 0 are D or negative D or negative G. And then, of course, the last paren and the first paren are effectively repeating. So the answer is 3. For the exponential function f, the value of f of 1 is k, where k is a constant. Which of the following equivalent forms of the function f shows the value of k as the coefficient or the base? It's a confusing question if you haven't done one like this before. I'm going to try to simply write the answer choices by example, what that actually would give you. I think that's probably the best way to explain how to do it in this case. So answer choice A, f of 1 would be equal to 50 times 1.6 squared. So f of 1 would be not a particularly helpful number. F of 1 would be 128. So 128 is k. Okay, but does 128 itself appear as a number in the equation? Well, no. The only numbers are 50, 1.6, and 1. So, no, I'm sorry. Well, coefficient or the base. So 50 and 1.6, so no. Okay? For B as in boy, it would be 80 times 1.6 to the 1, which is again 128, but the number 128 is not itself in the equation. And then for C as in cat, it's 128 is 1.6 to the 0, and anything to the 0 is 1, which is 128 being k, and of course 128 is in the equation, so that's the answer. And then just to be thorough, this would be 204.8 times 1.6 to the negative 1, which gives you 128, but the number 128 does not itself appear in the equation. Kind of a strange question, but it's C. That quadratic, the function g is defined by g of x is f of x plus 5. For what value of x does g of x reach its minimum? I think it's probably most helpful to understand how to do this using your knowledge of the rules of axis of symmetry. So the axis of symmetry for any quadratic is negative b over 2a. So for f of x, that's negative 64 over 8, which is negative 8. And then in general, when you shift from this to this, it moves it leftward 5 units. So 5 units to the left of negative 8 is negative 13. So this has axis of symmetry negative 13 is the answer. Now, you could do this also on Desmos. In fact, you could do it the long way, as long as you understand how to infix a unit as x. So g of x would be literally equal to 4 times the quantity x plus 5 squared plus 64 times the quantity x plus 5 plus 262. And you would zoom to see its vertex, which is at, negative 13.